One of the most common and erroneous claims about Black Clover is that it is a Naruto clone or ripoff. Now this notion has died down a lot lately. Every now and again, there will be some popular tweets or TikTok that rekindles the fire of negativity towards Black Clover and its own creativity and originality.
Really, let's find out. Ashta is a kid that's aiming to become the Wizard King, but unfortunately he's not very good at magic. And everybody looks down on Ashta thinking he can't do it. And everyone bullies him for being talentless. Not even his rival, taller Sasuke, believes in him.
It is honestly pretty disappointing as a huge fan of Black Clover, because I'm also a big fan of Naruto as well. And if you just look at the two series without biased glasses, you can tell quite clearly that Black Clover is actually the furthest thing from a Naruto clone or a Naruto ripoff. And there's actually many fallacies and hypocrisies that inherently dwell in those arguments. Like how it is quite easy to notice the similarities between Naruto and the series that released years before it: Dragon Ball, Hunter x Hunter, One Piece, and the 1960s manga titled Sasuke about a young ninja of the same name who is also a mythic historical figure. Yet many of the people who accuse Black Clover of being a Naruto clone will vehemently deny and defend Naruto from being a clone of those series, despite having the same number of similarities, if not more similarities to those. This is not me saying that Naruto is a ripoff of these series. It clearly is not. But it is quite hypocritical to believe that Black Clover is a Naruto ripoff and then not believe that Naruto is a ripoff of other series as well. So in today's video, I'm going to go quite in depth to prove to you why Black Clover is not a clone of Naruto or any series it gets accused of, like Bleach, Fairy Tail, and My Hero Academia, as well as Seven Deadly Sins. But also I will show his true influences, as there is actually very little evidence that Tabata, the creator of Black Clover, was even inspired a little bit by the Naruto series, if there is any evidence at all. There is far more evidence that he was inspired by other big-time series and mythologies, which is why I find it absolutely hilarious and baffling that people assume Black Clover to be a ripoff of the popular series by Kishimoto. So in this video, I will show why Black Clover is not a Naruto clone, and I'll show the true influences that inspired it to be created. There are multiple things to go through specifically to show why Black Clover is not a ripoff. That would be like comparing the setting, plot, characters, and power system to Naruto's own, and show why they are actually vastly different. First, let's start with setting. The setting of Black Clover is styled after medieval Europe, on a continent where different kingdoms exist, but the main kingdom is the Clover Kingdom. Meanwhile, Naruto takes place in a much more Eastern style village. So, the very roots of each series differ. Black Clover is a Western type fantasy setting, Naruto an Eastern type fantasy setting. Black Clover's plot is about Asta and his brother, Yuno, competing to become the Wizard King to prove that commoners can be great, as the society in Black Clover uses a very old style caste system of peasants, commoners, nobles, and royals. Asta has no magic. They join two different Magic Knight brigades in order to achieve their goal of becoming the Wizard King. The plot of Naruto is where the main character wants to become Hokage because he has always felt rejected by society, and the Hokage is the most respected member, so he wants to gain friends and love from others by becoming the Hokage. He goes to ninja school and joins Team 7 to begin his quest to become the Hokage. While sure, there are similarities in these plots, they are still different when it comes to motivations and such, as the motivation for Asta and Yuno to become the Wizard King are different and more noble than Naruto's reasoning for becoming the Hokage. They want to prove that peasants and commoners can become great despite only being peasants and commoners. The Wizard King is also a slightly different position to that of the Hokage. While they are both the most respected positions of power among the populace, the Hokage is essentially being the president, the lead politician, and the commander-in-chief in the military. Whereas the Wizard King is just a leader of the Clover Kingdom's armed forces, not the political leader. And the means of getting there are quite different. Asta joins a Magic Knight brigade. While he starts off as the lowest rank, he is still a full-fledged Magic Knight, going on missions without mentor figures from the very beginning of the series, as he is tasked to go into a dungeon alongside Luck and Noel, neither being very high rank within the Knights. Whereas Naruto is in more of a school setting in the beginning, with a direct master in Kakashi and fellow students Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto is actually naturally talented and has a lot of inborn chakra, whereas Asta has literally no magic and is actually terrible at using the anti-magic in the beginning. In fact, never even using it on his own for the first third of the series. People will point to stuff like the Royal Knight selection exams and compare that to the Chunin exams as showing that Black Clover copied Naruto, but that's just dumb. Do you really think that Naruto is the first one to have a tournament arc or an exam arc? No. But anyways, they are still different. The Chunin exams are a mixture of team-up battles through the forest and the 1v1 tournament. And this was a way to rank up as a shinobi, whereas in Black Clover, this was to form a team of elite knights. It didn't matter your rank, this was open to all ranks, and it was a made up of various teams of 3 protecting your own crystal and trying to destroy your opponent's crystal. Unlike the Chunin exam, in Black Clover's Royal Knights exams, there was high-ranked knights like vice captains and captains that participated in the tournament, and the teams were randomly made up from varying squads, allowing for knights who didn't usually work together to team up, sometimes even against their own usual teammates, like how Asta to fight Magna in this tournament. Yes, a tournament and an exam, but for a completely different reason, and done quite differently. Also, the Royal Knight exam is not interrupted by a big villain, unlike how the Chunin exams are in fact interrupted by a villain. The Chunin exams also include other villages, while the Royal Knights was just an exam for just the Clover Knights. Now next is the characters in the series, and there's nothing better to start with than comparing Asta and Naruto, the 2 main characters of the series. I still see people who think that Asta looks like Naruto, and I really don't see it. Blonde hair versus white hair, 2 different hairstyles. They both do wear headbands, but they're for completely different reasons and different style of headbands. In Naruto, essentially everybody has the headband, whereas Asta's is still a mystery as to why he has it. They have blue eyes versus green eyes. Both are short, but Asta is far shorter. Both are loud and somewhat obnoxious, but Naruto is kind of fit. Asta is just buff as a truck. Naruto is known for being a glutton, not Asta. They really look at best like cousins, not like brothers, and definitely not like twins, but people will say that Asta is a rip-off design of Naruto when they look quite different. I in fact don't even think they look related at all. While they both want to be the most respected person in their society, like I mentioned earlier, it's for different reasons. Asta is also far, far more motivated than Naruto, spending his entire life training with Yuno to overcome his lack of magic. He was running through tornadoes as a preteen. Naruto spent a lot of his time being a menace. Remember, the series opens with him defacing important monuments in the village. Whereas Asta not only has time for training, but he also helps with the daily activities with his church. Asta has physical strength, special swords, and anti-magic. Naruto uses chakra, the parallel to mana, his own huge amount, and that what he can draw from nature, and also the beast Kurama. Their power sets are very different. One of the funniest claims that people will make is they say that Asta is a clone of Naruto, because on a few occasions, he has made clones of himself, just like Naruto's shadow clones. One time during the cave arc against the mob monster, as well as when he fought against Dante. Naruto can make shadow clones, so people will call this a shameless ripoff of the Naruto series. But this is just absolutely frivolous. For one, Naruto is not the first series or character to create clones of himself. This has been a very popular and common thing for decades, if not centuries. Naruto makes his own shadow clone thanks to a technique that he taught himself. This is what he learned in the very beginning of the series thanks to the scroll. Whereas Asta actually does not make these clones himself. It actually isn't even his ability. This is all thanks to his squad mate, Ghosh, and his mirror magic. Ghosh already had a spell called Real Double, which allowed him to summon a mirrored clone of himself from the mirror world. He then developed this ability and came up with a new spell called Mirror Brigade, in which he was able to make several versions of Asta from the mirror world. A huge difference with the shadow clone technique is that the chakra energy is actually split between each host, whereas the Mirror Brigade actually summons a real copy from the mirror world, meaning each clone of Asta is the same power as the real original. And we know it's not just creating a clone through magic, it's summoning them from a different world, because it can also summon real anti-magic. I honestly can't believe that people will claim Asta is a clone of Naruto, just is not there, and their characters drift even further apart when you bring in both Kurama and Liba, the 2 demons trapped inside of them. Well, actually I just lied to you, like many Naruto stands will as well. Asta does not have a demon inside of him, he is a devil trapped inside of his grimoire. Sure, it was their mothers who bolted the ceiling, but it is still very different. Kurama was a terrible beast who was going to destroy the world if not for the ceiling. Liba was a weak, magicless devil, the orphan brother of Asta, who would have been consumed and possessed by the king of devils, Lucifero, if not for being sealed inside of the grimoire. Liba's whole goal as a devil is to kill all the devils. He's a good devil and has been good. Kurama was a terrible beast. His goal is not to kill off the other beasts because he sees them as terrible entities. Also, they're just quite different in power and character as well. Kurama is a pure power character, whereas Liba and his anti-magic is the ability to destroy and bypass power itself. Now onto the rivals of the main characters, Sasuke Uchiha and Yuno Grinberry-all, the two dark-haired, naturally talented bad boys. Or not. I actually made a video on this, but the anime unfortunately made Yuno more of a dick to Asta than he was in the manga. For example, in the manga, Yuno was shocked when Asta doesn't get a grimoire at first, but then he is like, of course you're getting a grimoire when he finally gets it, when he gets the 5th Leaf Clover grimoire, because he had full belief in his orphan brother's ability to become the Wizard King. Whereas in the anime, it shows him being more of a dick. This is an incorrect adaptation from the anime. The manga, the true source material, doesn't show this. Also, Yuno is not a bad boy in the manga or the anime. He follows the rules. He's kind of a goody two-shoes, unlike Sasuke. You have to remember that he has full belief that Asta could become the Wizard King, and same with Asta to Yuno. Remember, Asta and Yuno were raised together and have a very healthy rivalry based on mutual respect so far. And as of yet, Yuno has no bad boy arc. Sasuke and Naruto, on the other hand, have a very toxic relationship and much more so are actual rivals in a negative light, whereas Yuno and Asta are healthy rivalry based on mutual respect and brotherhood. Sasuke goes evil for a path to power, Yuno doesn't. Sasuke has lightning powers, whereas Yuno has wind powers, the powers of an elven spirit, as well as an elemental wind spirit. Again, like pretty much everything else, all claims of ripoffs are only surface level and will be only believed by very biased people or people who have actually not tried out Black Clover. I'm not really going to compare any other characters in Black Clover to Naruto, or else this video will really take hours to create. It will be hours long. But also because it really is Asta Naruto, Libe Kurama, and Sasuke Yuno as the vast majority of ripoff claims. Noelle or Mimosa, being a Sakura clone, is far less likely to hear, and it's less convincing than the others, so I'm choosing to exclude it from this video. The next comparison that I believe needs to be made is the power system comparison. In Naruto, there are the three main jutsus of taijutsu, the physical aspect of being a shinobi, ninjutsu, which is essentially using chakra being like an energy source similar to mana, and two abilities. These can include hand signs or seals, and then there's genjutsu, which are illusory techniques and are generally not real. And there's taijutsu, which is the physical aspect of being a shinobi, like using physical strength and using physical martial arts. There are also many sub-branches of ninjutsu, like senjutsu, which means they're a sage that uses to absorb the energy that resides in nature. Shinobi generally use the jutsus in a ninja fighting style. This contrasts to Black Clover and the mana and magic. While the supernatural energy of mana is somewhat similar to chakra and creates elements of many different kinds like wind and lightning as well, people use it in far different ways. Like in Black Clover, a lot of people generally fight like mages, standing far away and casting spells at each other, but the power system actually heavily differentiates between the two narratively of the series. For one, magic and mana amount is everything in Black Clover. The society is based on your attribute type and the amount of mana you were born with. While chakra amount and chakra type is quite important in Naruto, the entire society is not based on it like it is in Black Clover. Physical training is far more rare in Black Clover, so people who use it are at a huge advantage, and in Naruto, taijutsu, which is like physical training, is a part of their jutsu system, so it is hugely more used in Naruto compared to Black Clover, whereas it's really only Asta, Veto, Mereoleona, Yami, so maybe some other characters that really use physical training, like Klaus is starting to use it a lot more. It's way lesser used. People fight standing back, using their spells in a much more mage-like way. Rather in Naruto, you get up close, you use martial arts compared with your chakra, which is like your magic. Black Clover, mages are also gifted grimoires, which heavily varies the magic system and makes it different compared to Naruto, because while sometimes spells can be intentionally created, similar to how techniques are used and created in Naruto, a lot of time it is quasi-random in Black Clover, as you get a spell based on the situation you need. Yami needed a spell to break out of a dimension, so you got Dimension Slash. Noelle needed a spell that allowed her to control mana in a hectic area. She got Valkyrie Armor, that allowed her to control mana way easier. These spells will help in other scenarios, but they also be very specifically intended for a certain scenario. Except for the pre-made spells that are like Magnus Soul Chain Deathmatch. That was one that was inherently created for that intended purpose and wasn't just a spell created by emotion or need of situation. There is arcane magic, magic that specifically allows people to kill devils. Saint magic, which serves a similar purpose but is holy. Ultimate magic, which is an elven technique that derives from the soul. There's also true magic, which uses runic circles, so someone that can wield true magic is incredibly powerful. While on the surface level, the power systems seem similar, they still differ the deeper it gets and are used quite differently. Okay, so now you can clearly see. The setting, the plot, the main characters, and the power systems all differ from each other. This means that by proxy, Black Clover is not a Naruto ripoff or clone, is it its own series. I'm going to get over the real inspirations for Black Clover shortly, how Naruto likely was not involved at all in the creation process for any sort of inspiration or reference. But first, I want to go over a huge fallacy. It is also somewhat common to hear that Black Clover rips off My Hero Academia, Fairy Tail, and Bleach in congruence with Naruto. These are far lesser claims that are made than of Naruto, so I don't think these deserve their own videos, or if they did, they'd be much shorter. But this creates a huge fallacy. You cannot have Black Clover be a ripoff of 4 different series. For example, if you took 25% of each series and meshed it into its own cohesive narrative, then it's its own story. It can't be a ripoff if it's combining 4 different things, changing things, and making that a cohesive narrative with different themes and symbolism. If Black Clover is taking the Hokage motivation and rivalry from Naruto, the powerless main character from My Hero Academia, the Guild of Ruffians archetype from Fairy Tail, and similar powers and character designs and art style from Bleach, then it would still be its own series if you combine the 4 of them and made its own cohesive narrative. That would still be ignoring that Black Clover's one-shot released before Chapter 1 of My Hero Academia, which actually shows that Tabata wasn't stealing from Horikoshi, having the main character start off powerless in a world of powered people. Though, taking inspirations from other series is what literally every single author does. Kishimoto admits to taking heavy inspiration from Dragon Ball and the 1960s manga Sasuke. It's clearly okay for Yuki Tabata to take inspirations from other series as well. One of my favorite authors, Jim Butcher, did a bet and combined the idea of a lost Roman legion and Pokemon, and he got a New York Times best-selling series that nobody calls a Pokemon clone. Brandon Sanderson wrote a series called Mistborn, taking a what-if scenario from The Lord of the Rings, combining that with the heist idea from Ocean's 11, and he wrote a best-selling series called Mistborn that nobody calls Lord of the Rings or Ocean's 11 clone or ripoff. Yet Black Clover still gets this notion. That is probably only because of it being animated and then drawn in manga for anime. Whereas these other series are less popular and take place in novels. It is much harder to take screenshots of passages in a novel and spread it on social media and say that it's copying something, whereas you can take other screenshots or entire frames of an anime, panels of a manga, or even short clips of the anime with no context to show similarities in a series. In short, it's just far easier to show similarities between different manga and anime compared to novels, and far easier to manipulate people into believing it thanks to the removal of the context. I also think it is, in part, that generally with the rising growth of fandoms, the more toxic crowd they will attract. This does not mean that the fandom as a whole is toxic, it just means that there will be a lot more toxic people in the fandom at large. Anime has a huge audience in the West now. Clips of even lesser popular series can get millions of views, and that will pale in comparison to the streaming numbers, which also pale in comparison to the pirating numbers. Watching anime or reading comics is far easier to consume than reading novels. It's way quicker, generally, and it's way easier. As for an anime, you just sit and watch. You don't have to hold something or read long passages. Manga has more reading, but you can read far faster because of the comic style. I think because of how huge the fandoms are for anime and manga, and how easy it is to unfairly compare the integrity of the series, that is why there are so many erroneous criticisms of Black Clover being a clone of Naruto, and I believe that the main reason for this is because it is in the West. Naruto is unfathomably huge, even more popular than Dragon Ball, as shown by Google Trends. Harry Potter is by far the biggest book series of all time, and it's a Western product. But despite Naruto being an Eastern product, not only is it very competitive with the popularity of Harry Potter in the West, it is at times more popular than Harry Potter. Humans are victims of tribalism. It is in a way ingrained into our DNA. When we form a tribe and a form of fandom, it's quite easy to become very defensive of that tribe. This is what causes people to become very defensive of Naruto, and when Black Clover comes along, and Western companies advertise it as the next Naruto, it's so many different ties away. That's why people get mad and angry and say, nope, this is a copy, this is a clone, Don't watch it, don't read it, because we already have Naruto. This is our tribe of Naruto. But it's weird because it's Western companies that advertise it as the next Naruto, and that is so many different ties away from the original creator vision of Yuki Tabata, who created the manga in the East, which is something that we should finally get into. What are Yuki Tabata's influences for Black Clover? What was his goal? It is actually quite easy to see that he didn't take any inspiration from Naruto. And while people will shift from the claim of Black Clover is not a Naruto clone, but Black Clover would not exist without Naruto, that can actually still be quite easy to debunk by simply bringing up the real influences that Tabata used for inspiration. It is quite clear that the most present inspiration and reference for Black Clover is Berserk. I think this can be quite easily seen from Chapter 1, when Asta gets a large black sword that looks quite similar to Guts' sword, called the Dragon Slayer sword, and then in the manga Black Clover, it's revealed that the sword that Asta is called is the Demon Slayer sword, essentially proving Tabata's ode to Myra's work. There's a lot more than just the two swords that draws a connection between the two. Also the fact that they are medieval type Western fantasy stories, but it goes much deeper. Tabata, he's even stated himself in interviews, I want to make a manga like Berserk, but in shonen. Whether for its sets, its battles, or its history, the series remains an important source of inspiration for me. I wanted a manga in this spirit, but in the shonen style. This is shown heavily between not only the swords and characters of Asta and Guts, but the characters of William and Patry in Black Clover, and Griffith and Femto in Berserk. William and Patry are two souls that share the same body, whereas Griffith is his own character, but is given the name Femto for God Hand. The looks of William and Patry are obviously inspired and referencing Griffith, as well as following some similar themes and story paths in their character. You have the advent of the Tree of Ripoff, has also been directly compared by many fans to the eclipse within Berserk, both events where demons break from their realms and wreak havoc on humanity. You have the similarities of Sol and Casca, similarities between Charlotte and Farnese, and their own relationship between each other are similar as well. There really is a lot more to go here for Black Clover and Berserk, that would in actuality deserve its own video, the same long length as this one here, but just for those similarities. But for now, I'm going to link one here that is a good analysis on comparing and contrasting the two Black Swordsmen, Asta and Guts. Link to that video will be down below. It's a great video. But as for other influences that Tabata has mentioned for many other stories and franchises, he has Dragon Quest, Guillermo del Toro movies, and Harry Potter. He's even said that he is a huge fan of Bleach and Yu Yu Hakusho, even saying that Hiei from Yu Yu Hakusho is his favorite character of all time, and he used him for inspiration for the Black Clover series. That being Hiei's third eye, of his demon third eye. Because of that, he created a group called the Third Eye, which uses demon magic to create third eyes that enhance their magical powers in Black Clover. Tabata doesn't just use other manga for influences though, he uses mythology, Norse mythology, as one of his main references, even admitting this in the guidebook, that he used Norse mythology to come up with the name and idea for William's World Tree magic, which is the Yggdrasil, and uses the name of the Mistletoe, which in the myths is a sword made out of wood of the World Tree itself. Norse mythology sprinkles down deeper into the myths of Black Clover, as it contains elves, dark elves, and dwarves, with mentions of Jotun coming around the corner. Even Valkyrie exists as a concept in Black Clover, but I think most importantly is it's quite easy to find where Tabata found his influence for Asta and Yuno and their motivations to become the Wizard King and the Norse tale titled Sorlathatr. This tale revolves around two Nordic brothers, brother not by blood, but by bond, who compete with each other to become the kings of all Scandinavia. One brother is guided by a Valkyrie named Gondul, Gondul meaning one-wielder. Asta is squad mates with Noel, who has a Valkyrie form, and is pretty much the only character in the series who wields a wand. Then there's Yuno, the orphan brother to Asta, who is also vying to become the Wizard King, has Mimosa, a relative of the Valkyries, Noel and Aesir, who uses healing magic and has wings in her form. Whereas the brother in the tale, Hogni, is accompanied by a Valkyrie whose name means Fate Changer, which is essentially a type of way to look at Mimosa's healing magic, she can heal you to prevent a dark fate. There, we know that Tabata takes Norse stories as influence, and we know that this story has a lot of similarities to the starting plot of the series of Black Clover. It really seems too far close to be just a coincidence here, but even if for some reason Tabata actually never read this tale in Norse mythology, and it is something that could still be easily created through other mythological inspirations and just a good imagination. Not from Naruto, not even from One Piece, but from the tales of Norse mythology. Tabata puts the Norse influences in tandem with Hebrew mythology and the occult as well, as the concept of the Tree of Ripoff comes from these myths and religions, and even the devils of the same name exist within these branches. Aleister Crowley and his works also take on a huge inspiration for the series, as he does a lot of work on the Tree of Ripoff, and that is obviously taking place in Black Clover, as even the Devil Unit star on Ashta's chest hails directly from the works of Aleister Crowley, otherwise known as the Universal Hexagram or the Pointed Star. The trickling trails of popular fairy tales are also easy to stumble upon in this series. Noct and his Dog Devil, Cat Devil, Rooster Devil, and Donkey Devil are a clear reference to the town musicians of Bremen tale published long ago by the Brothers Grimm. Another fairy tale from the Brothers Grimm is that of Red Riding Hood, which is also referenced as well with Charmy and her glutton wolf, who might just be Fenrir. Remember guys, humans have been telling stories for thousands of years. We like tropes, we like similar plot structures, and with many millions of storytellers and many more stories than tellers, it is essentially impossible to come up with a 100% original idea that no other storyteller has ever done in any way or part in the past. Even the best authors of today will always admit that they have multiple inspirations that they're referencing in their stories. They mishmash their inspirations, and they add new twists and ways to tell them in their own way. Black Clover takes a shonen mold of Berserk, adding in references from Bleach, Yu Yu Hakusho, Dragon Ball, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Dragon Quest, Norse mythology, Hebrew mythology, fairy tales, and occults to create his own cohesive narrative of Black Clover. If you have friends or family who still to this day, in 2021, call Black Clover a Naruto Rip-off or a Naruto Clone, please send them this video, because clearly it is not a Naruto clone. Taking small clips or panels at face value by removing context and comparing them does not make something a clone or a rip-off. If Black Clover was in actuality a rip-off or a clone of Naruto, they would likely be sued by the author of Naruto for plagiarism. And if Black Clover was a Naruto clone or rip-off, it also wouldn't have the dregs of the My Academia fandom, Fairy Tail fandom, Seven Deadly Sins fandom, and Bleach fandom calling it a copy of their series as well. Because once you are a copy of 2+ series with your own cohesive narrative, taking inspirations from each, even though it really isn't, development, themes, and symbolism, then it is impossible for it to be a ripoff. And again, just because Crunchyroll, the Western distribution company for the anime of Black Clover, advertised it as the next Naruto, or the dethroner of Naruto as the new king of shonen, doesn't mean that Yuki Tabata, the creator of Black Clover, meant it to be. Tabata is the author of the manga, then his partners create the anime in Japan, and then that creators of the anime in Japan, they put it out to the third party. The Westerners get the rights to distribute the anime in the West. That is multiple tiers of separation. It was the Westerners using the insane popularity of Naruto in the West to try and draw the fans of Black Clover. Remember, Tabata, his original goal was to create a epic fantasy like Berserk, but in a shonen style. Remember guys, Black Clover is not a Naruto clone or ripoff. We can clearly see the different inspirations in this video, and that Naruto is never mentioned by Tabata from what I've seen online, but we see all the other stuff he's mentioned, and you can easily come up with two brothers competing to become king by just reading Norse mythology, not reading Naruto. And we know for a fact that Tabata reads Norse mythology, as he states this in the guidebook. But that being said, let me know your thoughts down below this video. This is by far my longest video I've ever made, so hopefully you guys do like it, put a lot of work into it. And also guys, I am writing a light novel series called 9 Fates. As of right now, there are 6 chapters. The 7th chapter will come out this weekend. I love the support so far. Got a lot of readers that are really liking it, enjoying it, so I appreciate that. So please check that out down below. I'll leave a link to it. It's just 9fates.com. With that being said, hope you guys all have an amazing day. Plus...